Welcome back, guys. Another episode of RX Radio. Big one. We've actually been trying to make this happen for a really long time. Tried to get it in person. Sonny and I are quite literally, as with, well, a handful of guests, ships passing in the night. Sonny Webster, for those of you who don't know, Olympic weightlifter. Competed for the UK in Great Britain at the Olympic Games for Olympic weightlifting. Has probably done more for the sport of Olympic weightlifting than the barbell itself. Just super charismatic, interesting guy in a sport that can otherwise be seemed a little bit stuffy, and that might not be fair, but I think we can all agree that Sonny's definitely has breathed new life into the sport and has done so on the backs of building an incredible business. And you get a little bit of insight. It's actually really cool. In going into the podcast, I've known Sonny for a handful of years, cross paths in Australia, in UK, places we both frequent often. He's from the UK, lives in Australia. Didn't really anticipate the podcast going down the route that it went. Talk about Sonny's business success and personal development, which I thought was super, super interesting. And I think a conversation not nearly had enough with people, at least transparently at a level that Sonny's at. So it was super awesome to kind of sit back and I greedily pick his brain as a fellow entrepreneur in the fitness space. So huge thanks to Sonny for doing what he does and, for lending us his time and insights and this transparency into the goings on, the ghost in the machine, if you will. So huge thanks to Sonny for that. For all of you listening, I've got a lot of DMs lately around the Prescript Level 1. If you are looking to register, registration is currently closed. The waitlist is up on www.pre-script.com. Go to the L1 page, and it's the only discount we have is for people who join the wait list. So if you get on the wait list now, you're going to get emailed when registration opens in a handful of weeks. And you're going to get the only discount that we offer for the course, 16 weeks, applied biomechanics, functional anatomy. If you're not sick of me yet, after 400, almost 500 episodes of the podcast, you will be after 4 months of me really just telling stories and teaching applied biomechanics and functional anatomy. So if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to reach out, leave a comment on the YouTube channel. That's right. Most of you have found us on YouTube. And if not, head on over. Enjoy today's episode. Huge thanks to Sonny again for coming out. Hopefully run this back in person again. We can cross paths somewhere in the world. If you guys haven't checked out Sonny Webster on Instagram, be sure to do that. If not, guys, do enjoy the episode. Lundy, hit it.
You're tuned in to RX Radio.
That's how I knew you knew what you were doing, because you were doing apparel well. I was like, dude, no one does apparel well. Apparel is apparel is like owning a boat. It's like really cool. And then you realize you're just throwing your money in the ocean. And it's like, dude, how, like, run it back. You don't get an intro. Everyone knows who you are. Fuck that. You don't get to do the whole thing of like, well, I'm Sonny. I came from blah, blah, blah. Everyone fucking knows. I just need to know, like, what was your first business venture? You're like, hey, I'm really good at lifting weights. Regular jobs seem very boring, so I'm going to do this as a business. What was the first, because as we were kind of leading in the intro, you're like, I have a lot of fingers and a lot of pies. What was the first finger and what was the first pie?
The first finger in the first pie, I'm going to take you back to when I was about 12 years old. And I used to go to Costco and buy big bumper packs of sweets and chocolate bars. And because I was a weightlifter at the school, I had a lucky advantage of actually getting a sports locker, which not many people got. So what I did is I filled my sports locker with different chocolate bars, Mars bars, Snickers, and sweets. And then I used to sell them at lunchtime and make a load of money. And once I made enough money, my other sport that I did was golf. So I used the money that I was making from the sweet selling to fund my golf club buying. And then from there, I found a hole in the market on eBay where people were extremely bad at photographing and marketing their products. So what I used to do, because I knew so much about golf clubs, is I'd buy golf clubs that I knew were worth a lot more than they were getting sold for because they're poorly marketed. I'd get them and I'd use my dad's camera and I'd shoot them properly and then put them back on the eBay and then make money. And that was my first business. I made around 20 grand doing that.
And you're how old at this time?
I was probably about 14 at the time. 13, 14.
Okay. On the record question, did you ever sell drugs?
No drug selling. I would have been a good drug dealer though, if 12-year-olds took drugs.
Oh, I thought I thought so. Well, where I come from, 12-year-old drug dealers are relatively commonplace. All right. So you've always sort of had this entrepreneurial spirit. Now, when does this energy start to focus on the fitness industry? When is it that you see the hole in the market? Because you do something that's actually pretty amazing. And not to be disparaging, it's just I can barely get my arms over my head. So the thought of doing one of your Friday insane combination lifts things is just so far from something I'm ever capable of doing. You took Olympic weightlifting and you're like, no, this is the vehicle that I'm going to, get into the fitness industry with, which before that was like a bunch of people who thought they were from Bulgaria or pretended to be from Bulgaria, wearing tracksuits and kind of being bitchy to everyone else that's not a weightlifter. Like, when is it that you're like, okay, I'm going to do weightlifting now as a business. This is going to be my sweet athletic locker, a golf club hustle. Like, what was the first venture you kind of stepped into in the conventional fitness space?
So I think, to be honest, I still feel weightlifting is very much like that and an extremely cliquey sport. I think I found my niche in weightlifting through expressing my personality. As you just said, the actual skill of Olympic weightlifting is something very few people can relate to. It looks like sorcery for a lot of people when they see weightlifting done well. And there was no ability for people to be able to really connect with the person that was doing the skill, because you'd see crazy ogre come out in ripped leggings, lift an obscene weight that you can't relate to, and then go back behind the curtain, and then the next guy would come out. And for me, when I first started getting into Olympic weightlifting, I wanted a way in which I could express my personality through my sport. And with it being a sport that you only have a matter of seconds to shine in, and that was very difficult to do. The complexes then became a way in which I could show off my skill and also give people a way to be entertained by weightlifting and something that was more than just an obscenely heavy lift in order to grow my audience. And I think above anything else, regardless of the different avenues that I now have from a business standpoint in Olympic weightlifting, comes from the fact that not because I'm the best weightlifter, not because I'm the most talented, but I think people relate to me a little bit more than they do other great weightlifters. And once you have that personal connection with someone, it makes it much easier, regardless of the avenue of business, to sell, because people buy into you ultimately.
So that's been deliberate from the impetus, from the onset. Like, understanding that key principle has been something you understood and didn't have to learn over time.
No, I discovered that before I started. And, the people that really know me get that. A lot of people who don't know me would be like, Sonny's the clown that does crazy lifts with a barbell. Whereas the people that do know me, you know that I use that as a hook to get people in. And then off the back of that, get them to understand my knowledge, my experience, and the tools that I have that they can utilize to help them. And I'm okay with it being that way. Now,
an obvious first portal of entry into business, your skill set is something that you can make a little bit more of like a sideshow to the business. You can use that shiny red ball of the crazy complexes. You've branched your business enterprise into things you didn't go to the Olympics for, in things that don't exist at the Olympic stage. What was the first venture where you're like, okay, I'm going to, as an extension of the brand I've built in fitness with the thing that I'm like freakishly good at, I'm going to now move laterally into the space and start to do this as a business venture? Like, basically something, where is it that you started to veer away from the core primary lifts that really kind of accelerated your audience and your reach, and go, well, I'm not going to sell products directly related to this. I need to figure out like a new market. I need to figure out a new marketing strategy. Like, I can't just solely rely on throwing barbells over my head and catching them on one leg and all of this stuff. Like, what was that experience like of like, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. I think I've really cultivated a market where I can sell to. I'm going to sell them this, and I anticipate these things to go wrong.
Yeah, good question. When I started Olympic weightlifting, I used to train at the Empire Sports Club in Bristol. It used to cost me £2 to do a training session. It was at that point I realized that weightlifters were poor bums. And that was the And at the end of the day, I think that kind of answers the question in a nutshell. Like, the market was never weightlifting, and it never has been. We've been very fortunate with CrossFit, and a lot of people didn't see the gap that I saw when CrossFit became popular, and they shunned the fact that people were now performing this very classical Olympic sport poorly. I saw that as an opportunity to share my knowledge and my skill set to help them. And I took them with opening arms, and then had a bigger audience than I could have ever imagined that I would have found in Olympic weightlifting, which became my marketplace. I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy in the early days of Olympic weightlifting, getting to know CrossFit, getting to know the people that were figureheads within that market, and, you know, slowly transitioning myself into understanding that. And that ultimately is what meant that I was then able to sell, first of all, weightlifting, but then second of all, through hundreds and hundreds of Olympic weightlifting seminars, discovering the fact that the biggest stumbling block for people when they wanted to learn this sport was actually, in fact, mobility.
Your business ventures, are they deliberate, or are they merely like, are you chasing opportunity, or are you chasing passion, or how do you weigh that out? Because at a certain point, I want this to get like diagnostic. Like, I met you through the business space primarily. We had some mutual friends and started to pay attention to what we're doing. I was actually there. We were in the UK together when you launched the mobility manual app the first time out in Tobacco Docks in East End of London. But I want to kind of dig to, like, there's a business brain behind this that's like, you know, you never went. Did you go to school for business?
No, I studied sports performance at Bath University. I studied sports performance at Bath University. So there was no business. No.
Okay, because it's. I mean, because when would you say that your fitness business started from? Like, you look back at a calendar. You have a day where you're like, okay, this is the day that this was incorporated, or something like that.
Yeah, I think ultimately it got to come, like, in answer to your question around, like, is this purely opportunistic, or is this something that, you know, I'm doing out of passion? My underlying goal, I guess, in life is to change the way that people perceive the sport of Olympic weightlifting and make it accessible to the masses. That is my mission in life. Okay. The vehicles that I've chosen to do it through is Olympic weightlifting, and through, you know, one of the biggest things that stops people from enjoying Olympic weightlifting, which is not having the range of motion in their body to actually perform the sport, which is why the mobility manual became what it became. But prior to that, just like a lot of weightlifters, I wanted to share the lessons that I'd been taught and was fortunate enough to absorb from some of the best minds in the world when it comes to Olympic weightlifting. I digested that and then made it easily digestible to the person that wants to come in the gym and snatch 40 kilos, or the person that wants to be able to do a clean and jerk with 50. Is the type of person that's, you know, in excess of the age of 30 years old, right the way up to clients that I work with that are 65, that, hey, Jordan, they're not trying to go to the Olympic Games here. They're not even trying to represent or compete in the national championships. They just want to do the sport of Olympic weightlifting because it's fucking cool. And it gives people longevity, and by far is the biggest flex in the gym when someone's snatching. So this was who I wanted to help. And, you know, with that being said, that's what really born initially the Sonny Webster Academy. And then off the back of that, what is now the Lifting Zone and the Mobility Manual.
What was the point where you ran into your first unknown in business development? Like, what was the first gaffe where you're like, oh, I had to fill out that form? Like, fuck, I had no idea, man. Like, I just wanted to make weightlifting cool. Like, there's so many roadblocks operationally to running a successful business with no business background, and sort of armed with this passion of like, hey, I want to make weightlifting cool. I want to make it accessible. At a certain point, like, the tax man comes around and goes, excuse me, Sonny, a word. Like, what was your first big lesson in business when you got into this?
Cool. Yeah, good question. I think for a good while doing my seminars, selling training programs, I was making good money. When I first started selling online programs, far before anyone else was doing it, I was doing it via, like anyone was, via PDF. Okay. I was putting a reach out on social media saying, if you're interested, send me a message. I had no automations, no setup. Send me a message. I send you an email with the information. They would then go, yep, I want to do this. And then I'd send them a payment link to PayPal. I'd let them confirm with me that they had made the payment in PayPal, and then I'd email them the PDF. I was making thousands of pounds doing this until one day I was on a train to London and got a call off a gentleman called Cam Jarrett. And he goes, hey, Sonny, I've seen you selling your training programs. Did you know that that could be automated? And I was like, what do you mean? What is a sales funnel? What is it? What is an email system? And, you know, Cam taught me the early stages of how to actually legitimize the online business. And this is going back, I'm talking 2015, 2014. So we're in 10, 11 years ago now. That was the first thing. But I think far beyond that, when things really started to grow, there became a point in my journey where I was finding those struggles that people would have having not developed a business before. And there's only so far you can get working shit out yourself and making mistakes. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned through trial and error. But there became a point, if I really wanted to scale and grow, I needed to bring in expert minds. And that led me down the path of reaching out to people that were far more successful than me in business to sit, listen, and learn. And I've always been a big believer of taking half an hour out of my week to absorb someone's knowledge that's better than me. And I had the balls to just reach out and ask. And I was sat on a call one day with a gentleman that owns a e-commerce company here in Australia called Topeka. And I wanted to understand e-commerce because I was about to launch my clothing brand. He said, Sonny, you're not, so I was on the call with the guy of Topeka, and he said to me, Sonny, you're not a CEO. You sound like more of a creative. He said, if I can give you one piece of advice, get off this call and go and hire yourself a CEO. And I knew just the man for the job. So I got off the phone. I said, rang up my good friend, Jeff. And I said, Jeff, fancy being the CEO of my company? And that's when things really started to change.
So it was that immediate. It wasn't, you didn't have an ego attached to being the guy who called the shots. Like you just hung up the phone. I'm assuming you had a rotary phone. You hung up the phone and then picked up the phone and called the guy right away. And we're like, yeah, you're going to run this?
100%. At the end of the day, like everyone like has a skill set within a business space. And just when you're the guy that's coming up with the ideas, like that strangles businesses and their ability to grow. My expertise were not in scale. They were not in being a CEO and being a leader, understanding financials and understanding where it was appropriately managing budgets. I'm the guy with the ideas and the guy with the operation skills. I make shit happen. And in order to really grow a business far beyond, you know, a foundationary level that people can get to with an audience, I had to step aside, lean into my strengths and bring someone in with the strengths that I didn't have.
And that was, I'm assuming, a smooth transition. Like, was there any hiccups on that road? Like how easily is, you know, the data transfer process from someone who intimately knows the intricacies of the business far past what can be tangible on a piece of paper? Like how bumpy a road was that handoff of like, all right, you do CEO things, I'm going to go do the other things, delineating that workflow. How long did it take? What were the big gaps? What were like the, oh, fuck, I thought you were doing that, the Spider-Man moment where you're both pointing at each other? Like that had to have been a nightmare.
Yeah. You know what? I think that as you will be about your baby, Prescript, like there's a certain amount of emotional attachment you have to a brand and to your baby that can make logical decisions very difficult to make when you're emotionally attached to something. Having a CEO or having someone that doesn't have that level of emotional attachment to your product is really what allows you to make more logical decisions. And that's something that me and Jeff will constantly discuss. one thing that I was very smart about when I started, or I chose my CEO, is it was the person that helped me set up my first ever business 13 years ago with no interest in the financials or needing what I was offering him more than anything, because he had retired. But I knew that he possessed the skill set and understood weightlifting well enough to be able to sit by my side and be a great, I guess, mentor and leader in that essence.
Now, when you're bringing in someone who could potentially clip your wings, like moving fast, executing, these are consistent their personality traits, right? Like someone like you're talking briefly about your travel schedule, like, you know, it's a light travel year, but the air miles are still going to be nuts. How have you dealt with, like, I don't know if conflict is the right word, but how do you deal with things operationally or even from a personality perspective when you get told no? Has that ever happened?
I get told no a lot of the time, but I think one of the big things is with the business, it's trying to minimize the amount of things that depend on me. And that's where, you know, we've got a team of 18 people now behind myself and my brand. And within that team of 18, there's managers, there's people that have responsibilities from a marketing standpoint. There's people that have responsibilities from a media standpoint. There's people with responsibilities from a coaching and delivery standpoint. And at the end of the day, I minimize my dependencies through them. I hand off responsibilities. I think when you build good relationships with the people within your team, they want to be there to turn up for you too, to allow you to do what you're good at. Me being in front of people, delivering seminars, delivering, being at events is what ultimately helps the brand lead from the front. But a big thing with what we've done over time, Jordan, was we went from it being Sonny Webster Academy and it all being about the Sonny Show to it being the lifting zone and the mobility manual. One, so that ultimately I could grow beyond my own name, but two, to be able to bring other people in to help those businesses drive forward without it being reliant on me, because it's just not healthy from a psychological standpoint and a mental capacity standpoint to have to sit with that, you know, all the time. Did you
have a capacity breaking point? And is there anything you miss from the days when it was just you, or it was just the Sonny Show?
Yeah. Do you know what? I've had to sit with myself a lot over the last year or so and remind myself that it is an absolute luxury to have a problem to solve. And to have people that are reliant on you, and the opportunity that you create for people is a great pleasure and a luxury. Because at times in business, it can feel like a huge burden. At the end of the day, if I don't get up and do my shit, people ain't going to get paid. People aren't going to be able to feed their families, you know, and that's a huge burden that I sat with for a long time and let it really deplete my mental capacity in any other aspect of my life and my training. But I've changed my perspective in the way that I look at that now as more than anything a great honor to be able to have that opportunity each day when I wake up. Don't get me wrong, I still have days where I think, fuck this, but it's also a nice thing to be able to do for people.
What was the catalyst that drove that change? Like, obviously, like, motivation has, you know, a carrot and a stick component to it. What were the components of motivation that, like, I don't know, I feel like making a change at that level is very difficult. Like, heavy is the head that wears the crown is kind of like a moniker that comes to mind, but it's like, you just wake up one day and you just made a choice cold turkey that, like, I'm not going to be a victim of, like, the circumstance that I created. I'm like, was there a singular moment that really tipped you over of like, okay, now I look at this problem and I frame it this way?
Yeah, there becomes a point, I feel, in growth and in scale where the money doesn't matter anymore and you feel numb to more of it. It doesn't make anything more exciting. The quote, more money, more problems exists, and the actual upside to more money does not continue to go. up like you expect it to. At the point that that happened, I realized that I had to reground myself to understand that that is not why I'm doing what I'm doing, and bring myself back to realizing the purpose and of what I do to help people. And that was a big turning point, I think, when I came back to that. It made creating content enjoyable again, rather than something that I was obliged to do. It brought me back to thinking again about why I love what I do, rather than, sometimes I think, with my overheads as a business, I think, do you know what? Oh, it's so easy, just fuck all this. And I'll go sit on an island. I'll jump on my laptop for a few hours a day. I'll make a good amount of money that I probably couldn't spend on my island, and I'd be fine. But at the end of the day, I think that's the point that you get to in scale and growth, where you have these decisions to make as to whether, am I cut out to this, to take this next step or not? And I had to sit with myself to ask myself those questions, to be able to realign and I guess find a place of happiness again in what I was doing.
How constant is that process? Like, how often do these reminders have to? They'd ebb and flow. Like, is this a daily thing? Like, it's funny because I don't know how often you talk about business, but it's definitely something that since you've been on my radar, I was like, because what I love about you and what you've done is that you don't have to talk about it, right? The lifestyle you live, the impact that you have, the engagement with your clients and your groups and success stories, all of that to me is like, oh, like if I was asked like one person about business, I would call you, and you don't ever bang on about like anything to do. Like, you're just out there, doing crazy shit on Fridays. You're making t-shirts, you're having fun, but it's like, well, that's what success to me like looks like. How often do you need to remind yourself or ground yourself as you constantly are venturing into new projects or resurfacing old projects or starting new businesses? Like, is this a daily thing? Is it a weekly thing? Is it come as it goes? Like, how do you recognize some of the warning signs of like, fuck this, I'm moving to Bali, fuck everyone, bring in a laptop, I couldn't spend it all anyways, you can't take it with you when you go, like, what am I doing? Like, this is such a personal question. Like, I'm going to send me an invoice after this, a little Sonny business therapy session.
One of my favorite quotes, right, is the biggest lessons you learn are when you lose. So I think, like, at the end of the day, through everything that people absorb of me on social media, it's a highlight reel, like it is for everyone. And that I've had just as, if not more, losses than I've had wins in terms of the things that I've attempted to do, tried and failed at, as I have won. But yet through every one of those downfalls, I've learned a lesson, which is extremely exciting. And I remind myself of that. Now, on a daily basis, we'll have days where you think, fuck, an employee does something shit, or you miss out on like an opportunity or a sale. It's very easy to let that fluctuate your mood and emotions on a daily basis. You can't afford to be working like this on a weekly basis. And I'm very fortunate to have mentors like Phil Graham in my life and Jeff, my CEO, to remind me to stop looking at things in very short windows, because when you're trying to make big changes and big levels of growth, you can't look in days, you can't look in weeks, you can't even look in months. At the very shortest integer of like assessing something, you need to look at like a quarter, every 3 months, every 6 months, every year, these bigger periods of time. And when you do that, it stops you from being affected so heavily from the day-to-day traumas of, fuck this, I'm leaving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I foresee like a future where like that one Batman movie where like Alfred goes to like some island somewhere and he just sees Bruce Wayne and he doesn't say anything, he just waves. Like Sonny's going to be doing a camp in Bali and I'm just going to be sitting back with like an Arnold Palmer iced tea and just like give you a wave. Like, Jordan fucking lost his mind. He's out just living in Bali for the rest of his days. Yeah. Operationally, with so many fingers in so many pies, like what are non-negotiables? What are things like, obviously lifting is undoubtedly a big part of this process as far as like, I don't know what the right term would be, like anchoring you or grounding you, but like what are things that, you know, in dealing in higher stress environments where, you know, as you sort of indicated, like the highs can be really high and the lows can be really low. What are things that you do? And it doesn't even have to be a behaviors thing, but it's like, how do you stay level at this level?
Yeah, good question. I'm very much a creature of habit. I'm a very emotionally driven person. And in order for me to feel control in my life, weightlifting is that, you know, I make no hiding of the fact that, you know, I've not been able to do the sport that I love for the last 7 years, but weightlifting has always been, something that has given me so much more than the ability to compete. It gives me a sense of stability in my life. And if I'm training, then I feel like I'm in control. No matter how mad the tornado is swirling around me, if I'm training and I've had that sensation that I get from training, everything's going to be okay. That is one constant that I need in my life for stability. I find it very hard to switch off, like most business owners do. So I'm a creature of habit when it comes to routine. I like to do the same things in the morning when I wake up. I like to go for a walk first thing. Little things for me like that give me a sense of stability is really important. And we are, as humans, we thrive on that routine and stability. And I'm no different in that respect. And as long as those things are in play, the training, the simple routines in the morning in terms of what works for me, and I don't have a crazy fucking morning routine. I don't get up and meditate and read a book for fucking 12 like time. I just have simplicity in those first few moments and my training. And as long as those two things are continuums, then the day-to-day, I guess, is fine. And I like a little decompress on a Friday night as well.
I don't even think I'd have to ask what that means. But what happens when things go wrong? Like, you know, I've sustained some pretty gnarly injuries from lifting weights, and that was taken away. Like, what would you do, or what have you done if one or two of those pieces, like how reliant are you on those tools? Like, worst case, you walk outside and get hit by a bus and you can't snatch tomorrow. Like, how do you, like, what are the internal coping mechanisms outside of like the simplicity of a routine? Because, you know, how sturdy is that shelter between you and the tornado?
Yeah. Well, I think relating it back to injury, it's the difference between a chronic injury or an acute injury. You know, at the end of the day, it's almost worse when something is slowly over time, your routine is being affected in the long run. So what I mean is, if my bedtime or my wake up time fluctuates for an hour and it gets later and later, over time, that's going to have a negative effect. If, for example, my diet slips and I start eating shit and shit over time, I'm going to see that change, and that's going to affect me. Going out and all of a sudden getting hit by a bus is like an acute change that's going to make a significant impact in that given moment. But I remind myself that there's always a path back to where you came from, because you leave the breadcrumbs to get there. And that's the thing for me, in like that reflective state that I feel that you need every 2 to 3 weeks, where you go like, okay, how's that last couple of weeks gone? What was good? What was bad? Reflecting on that allows you to keep an eye on where you've come from. And by doing that, there's always that path back. And, you know, if I go and get hit by a bus tomorrow and I can't snatch the rest of my life, there is still going to be a path back to health again beyond that. You know, I find passion in not through running, but through doing CrossFit now. I like to get a sweat on and do that. There's always something about exercise. I've started playing paddle. I'm enjoying playing paddle, which is Americans pickleball. You know, you have to have things outside of that one sport that you can lean into as well. I think just on that as well, Jordan, like, weightlifting is a big part of my life, but it doesn't define who I am. And it took me a long time after the Olympics to realize that, as a lot of athletes do. You know, it's a momentary part in my existence, that whole Olympic thing.
If you were to start it all over now, maybe, hold on, I want to backpedal a little bit. Did you ever think you'd get to the position you're in business-wise? Like starting off where you're like, okay, I'm going to get to this level of scale. That's the goal.
That was always my intention. I think I always had that intention. I was always that driven to be able to be as good as I can be and grow as big as I can. I'd like anyone, would like to be further down the road than I am right now. If I was to go back to the start again, I wouldn't change anything, because the lessons that you learn are the most enjoyable bit, you know, and it takes people years and years to realize that ultimately, like, everything that I've experienced or gone through up to this point was part of my path and part of my journey, good or bad, you know? So, am I where I expect to be? Yes. And I want to continue to grow, but I'm also very mindful of the fact not to lose sight of as I keep looking into the distance, that pot of gold is going to continue to move. And my biggest fear is ultimately to never find contentment in where I'm at, you know, as a lot of aspirational people or ambitious people find.
Were you, when you started this, were you as introspective as you are now? Like, I guess the question I'm trying to parse out is, what has come further from the starting point? The potential scale and the realized scale of the business, or the potential growth and realized scale of you as an owner? What is farther from the initial starting of like, okay, I do this for a living now?
My awareness, probably more than anything, you know. But I guess that's come only in the last couple of years, and I don't really know what stemmed that. But I think it was at the point where, like I said, growth gets to a point, and then, like I said, there's no further fulfillment from that extra bit. You stop getting enjoyment from a sports car or a bigger house or a new watch. Like, these things stop giving you what you feel is going to be that pleasure. You don't get pleasured by those things so much, and you start to have this, I guess, moment where your pleasure is being given to you from far simpler things. A day when there's no bad things that go on. A day when you get like a day without email and to not look at your emails. A day to just, you know, relax. And I think it's at that point where that transition happened for me.
And that really carries a lot of weight, knowing a little bit about your shoe collection. So the fact that, you know, stuff, and, you know, I really wish you were a size 12 US, because if I knew that, like, hey, you don't need these material things, dog. Like, we've transcended. I want those Off-White 5s. Send them over. Send them over. You transcended, motherfucker. Like, I really wish that you could have just had the same size foot as me, because that would have been really great on the timing. If just kind of you turn into a monk, you know, I'll take a Submariner. I'm just saying, like, you know, if you want to just not, I'm your guy. I'm your guy.
But I've been there and I've done it. I've stepped in that. I've been in those shoes when I needed a new pair of shoes every day to get a hit. You know, I've been through that myself, and like, everyone has to go through that. Like, don't get me wrong, I still get excited about watches, cars, and as soon as I get a car, I'm like, oh, I'm looking at my next one. You know what I mean? It's like, that doesn't change, because when you're an ambitious person, I think you'll always strive for that. But I think it's understanding that gives you pleasure, not happiness, that's important. And that's probably one of the best lessons my friend James Smith taught me.
What does a bucket list look like for you?
A bucket list, in terms of things that I haven't done that I want to do, it's a really interesting question, because I'm trying to still work that out myself at the moment in terms of where I want to be and what I want from life in that longer form state. But I think above anything else, like what's more important to me, anything, is to be like truly happy in my day to day and have that routine. Like, I don't think that there's things that I haven't done that haven't given me that. There has been. Is there things out there that will continue to give me that? Probably. But I think above anything else, Jordan, probably experience is something that I continue to long for, experiencing something that I haven't previously experienced. I'm turning 30 in just over 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks. I'm going shark cage diving with great whites. I'm like, that's something I've never fucking done before. I want to do that. So I guess experience.
The fact that you're just turning 30 is like good for you. Because you got a baby face. It's hard to tell. Because like you live with weightlifters, you don't really stress out about shit because you only got to do 4 reps a week or whatever the fuck you guys do. It's bullshit. I look like the after photo, dog. Like I look like what Sonny would be next to on a cigarette package. like don't smoke. Don't. Oh man, good for you. Do you ever see a point where this forward-thinking behavior, this sort of, to put a term on it, like this pursuit of happiness, takes you out of fitness?
No, I think, like I said, for the same reasons that we just spoke about a moment ago, I need that continuum for stability in my life. And, I think without fitness, I won't be able to do that from a personal pursuit. I've always dreamed of, I feel like I would make someone else a shitload of money. And I've always like dreamt of being, I don't want to be a business coach, but I would like to spend time working for someone else with someone else's financial capital to make crazy things happen and do cool shit.
Call me. We'll talk. I hate this. I'll be the creative. You tell me no, and we'll run it. We'll run it through. I got it. It's all planned out, man. I got your next quarter century planned out for you.
I like the idea of that. So in essence, from a business perspective, yeah, I think I could be involved in something other than business, other than fitness. And that opportunity does excite me, but shit, you know what I mean? I'm 30 years old. Who knows what the next 10 years will bring?
Are you, or have you ever been addicted to stress?
I don't think I thrive on, I don't think I enjoy stress. I don't process it extremely well. I take on huge burdens in myself, in that I worry way more than I should do. I had my first ever LSD experience, maybe 3 months ago, 2 months ago, start this year. And in that experience, I think one of the biggest things that I learned in that moment was to worry less and everything, that was it was a very introverted experience, but I think from that, I found to, I guess, tell myself to worry less about the small things, because ultimately everything continues to move. Time continues on past my moment of worry and fear. And yeah, that was something that was really reflective for me, for sure.
Was that part of your athletic pursuit? Was like worry and fear, like, was that what drove you to like, or maybe a better question, if not that, then what? Because it seems like very useful. Those seem like very useful tools. And I tend to not, I have a miter saw and I don't throw it out, because a miter saw is a very useful tool. Like what initially drove you to, maybe your success in the athletic arena, and how difficult is it to maybe give those things up?
I think that there's an expectation as a human being of what we feel as though we should achieve. Like there's a point in which we want to achieve a certain thing for ourselves, and then there's a certain, especially as a man, of achievement that you wish to achieve for other people. To feel as though that you've done right by them, whether it be a father, whether it be a figure in your family, that you want to know that you've, I guess, achieved for them and achieved a certain height that you should do. And weightlifting gave me a purpose to do that. A certain expectation that you know, I knew from a young age I wanted to compete at the Olympic Games, and that's something that I was always ever driven by. But it's like I said to you now, from something that at a moment in my life felt like the most important thing that ever existed is now just merely a moment in time and a memory, you know? So I think that's really what I consider in understanding whether I'm truly achieved what I want to achieve and continuing to go on to do so.
Is that a tough mile marker? I've known some Olympians very, very closely, and through the transition out of their career, and all of them, well, not all of them. There's a superlative path for an Olympic. Now, some are, you know, in epically bad situations, and some are in epically amazing situations. But there's no doubt when someone who's the best at something goes away from that thing, that only two fates in my experience have existed. It's like, well, I have this mile marker that is the best in the world, and whatever I do next has to be that level. Like, that's either a conscious or subconscious expectation or drive, or the ones who just can't cope. And then they, you know, I've seen it happen both ways. Like, how often or how frequent was that mile marker a frame of reference coming out of your like the peak of your athletic career and transitioning into business? And do you think about it much often?
I reflect on it as, like, you know, the lessons that it was something that I always wanted to do and achieve. And I was fortunate enough to do it at a very young age. It's a moment, like I said, in time. It taught me a lot of great lessons, but being able to achieve the highest level in sport has given me the tools and understanding to be able to apply that same lessons and approach that I did in sport to other things, which I'm extremely grateful for. Is it a mile marker in my journey? Yes. But as I said to you, it's not now what defines me. And I think ultimately it comes back to, like, understanding what your purpose is, having purpose and understanding why you do what you do. And ultimately, as human beings, we want someone to be proud of us. We want someone to tell us that we're doing good and making an impact, you know. And there's a huge amount of responsibility that is put on ourselves by ourselves to achieve that, you know, in any aspect for anyone.
It just seems like such a juxtaposition that you've come from the most objective sport on the planet, right? Where, you know, it's so insane. If no one's ever watched a competitive weightlifting meet, like, it's the formatting is not like powerlifting, which some people might be familiar with listening to this. Like, the fact that the best guy in the world leads into himself in a meet and has to lift the 3 world records or 2 world records lifts and 3 world record attempts 2 minutes onto himself and doesn't have competition, like, and the strategy and, like, the backhandedness of, like, putting up numbers so other people have, like, Olympic weightlifting meets, when you know what you're watching and you know a bit of the strategy, are actually super exciting, but it's all objective. Like, it's all numbers, right? Like, you talked about, you know, what success looks like, what motivates you now versus then. And it, to me, you know, getting to the games as a goal is very binary. There's 0 to 1, right? You were not there, then you were there. You know, you had to, at a certain point, ascend the ranks and snatch this and clean and jerk this and total this and beat this guy and do this. And all of this is numbers. It's all just very, like, there's no subjective interpretation. Transitioning your ethos around success to something that's entirely objective, right? Because the money thing, that's easy, right? Oh, where I'm playing the kilo game, but now with intervals of thousands, tens of hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. Oh, I get this. I understand. Oh, okay. Next attempt, 183 kilos. Next quarter, you know, 7 figures, right? Or this many, whatever. Stepping out to the subjective ledge of, like, how do I feel today? I felt happy. How smooth a transition is that? Like, is there a part of your old brain that goes to the data, that goes to like, measuring progress was what made you objectively better than other people? Now it seems like those tools are not of use to you anymore.
I feel like, you know, I still at moments, like, weightlifting in itself and that that, like you said, very objective pursuit that I previously did was a very selfish pursuit that I went on and did myself. And, you know, I achieved that. But when it comes to waking up and feeling happy, we're still affected. I'm still affected on a daily basis by how many sales did we do? How much money did we make yesterday? But if I let that be the determining factor on my happiness for a given day, then I've lost, you know what I mean? So it's more than a reminder. And have I completely worked that out? No. And but I'm aware of it. And for many years, I wasn't aware, but now I have that awareness when I know when I'm being affected by, you know, not having a good week of sales or the business not being where I want it to be. Like, it all comes down to awareness, like, more than anything. And it doesn't mean that it gets any easier to be able to process these things. It's just having awareness gives you an answer. It gives you that almost objective thing that you're looking for, answer that you're looking for, because it's kind of like, I know why I'm feeling this way, you know?
Now,
Ultimately.
speaking about potentially getting into a business advisory role outside of what how you currently advise the companies that you operate, when in your social network, I know you to be friends with a lot of business owners in the fitness space, and I'm sure outside. When people are coming to you for advice, what is like maybe the top three things or the top three pieces of advice that you start giving business owners from your experience? Like, obviously, like, awareness sounded like a big one. That's maybe something that's a little bit easier said than done. But what are like things that when you are being called upon, when your phone rings and says, "Hey man, I have a problem," what are the three big things that you are imparting now as you have kind of eclipsed these milestones and grown and scaled your business to a point where it's like, "Hey dude, I just kind of want to be happy every day"?
Yeah, I've made a shitload of mistakes, like in business, in growth, and in like, that's, if we were talking like scaling a business as one small business, one small lesson. If we talk about building a team, there's another group of lessons. There's so many elements and facets to business on a whole where there's lessons to be learned, and it has a huge impact on the size of the business that you're discussing. If someone's coming at me from a point where, they're just trying to set up an online business, what's most important? I'd say, having a really good product that people love and you believe in would be of the utmost importance. If you're a middle of the run business and you're wanting to scale, you need to make sure that you have the operations and the systems in place so that when you do scale, things don't break and operations are in place. So every business, depending on size, will have things that are important to them that are not. And I think for a lot of time when people, if I was to simplify that and broaden it, we absorb business knowledge from people that are at the end of the journey, the likes of Alex Hormozy, the people that are running hundreds of millions of dollars of companies, and trying to apply methodology that they're utilizing at a multi-million-dollar business to our very small businesses. And it's not feasible. So what I would suggest above anything else when you're trying to learn or develop in a lesson, in the same way that I approach how I educate people, I teach people how to snatch 100 kilos by going back to what it felt like and what it was like for me to snatch 100 kilos, not from what I know now. And they're the same questions that you need to be asking someone when you're looking for advice. What did you do to make your first 10 grand a month? What did you do when you were setting up your first online sales funnel? Rather than trying to learn from the principles that the business is currently running at. And I've kind of danced around your question because we would be here all night if I was to talk about three things, like I said, because I could talk for hours on the business. But I think that puts it quite simply in terms of what's important when you are asking those questions. I think that in each of those aspects, they're lessons that I've learned myself about quality of product, how easy it is to understand a product, operating and managing a team, understanding that skill set in order for scale and growth. you know, leaning into your own expertise, time management, sunk cost fallacy in itself, spreading yourself too thin across multiple different tasks and not seeing growth in any of them. They're principles that I learned from weightlifting that I apply to business. In the same way you see a CrossFitter go in and you look at their training and they're doing 1,000,001 different things and trying to achieve adaptation, but not really seeing any significant growth in any of those aspects, versus a weightlifter's approach where we go, we're going to spend 6 months in getting really fucking strong. And while we're getting really strong, our technique may subside. And then we're going to take that strength and transition it to the classical movements, the snatch and clean and jerk. Then we're going to taper and we're going to peak. And having this approach to a business and to growth is the lessons that I now apply.
What are your frontiers? What are your big problems right now? What are your problems when you pick up the call to call your mentors that you're like, right, I need your advice for this problem at this level of my business now? Like, what are your big opportunities?
I think the biggest challenge that I face at the moment is ability to, I'm going to explain it like this, but to sidestep, to change direction at speed. The market that we now deliver in or sell in is extremely fast paced. It's extremely diverse and it's constantly changing. The minute you feel like, fuck, I've cracked this from a marketing standpoint, you sit in that comfortable zone where everything's going like this. And then all of a sudden someone turns the tap off and you go, fuck, okay, what's next? And it's constantly being able to transition between those things that it can sometimes be quite challenging when you're a bigger business. Because all of a sudden, everything that you've invested time and energy into from a marketing aspect, you're like, this is working, let's just do all this. It doesn't work. And then it changes. And it's not to say that what you weren't doing didn't work, isn't going to work for someone else. It's just at the moment when you were doing it, it's great. I remember when I was the first person doing call out posts or doing call out posts in the fitness business for high ticket clients. And I'd be inundated with fucking thousands of leads that I couldn't even process. Using the same methodology that I used to use for a call out now yields 10 to 20. Why? Because the market's changed. People become accustomed to being sold to or to a certain strategy, and you need to pivot. You need to sidestep. And that's something that I'm constantly working on in order to be able to stay one step ahead of the game.
Do you feel ahead or behind?
You're constantly behind. But you know what? The most exciting thing about business is the most exciting thing about business is the figuring it out. Because when you do, you're like, that gives you that hit. You're like, fucking got it. And I remind myself that that's the exciting bit, like sitting with my team of creatives and my media team and go, right, what are we going to do this week that's going to cause that like change or that interaction? Because you're playing with human emotion. You're playing with the psychology of people. And like, that is so exciting to understand someone's buying habits, someone's behaviors, someone's emotions to, I guess, respond to an action or a sentence or something that you're doing in business. That's one of the most exciting aspects of it.
What are the parts of the business that don't get you as excited as what we just saw? Like, what's the opposite of the business conversation? Like, what is the thing that you get dragged into? Like, oh God, just talk to me about this once a quarter, please.
Taxes, finance, legals, like anything like that. Like everyone, I just don't want to fucking hear it. I just give me the bottom line, just whatever. Like the hassles that every business, will experience. Like, fuck, you have to absorb it and you have to take it in. But hey, I focus on what I'm good at, and I let the people in my team that are good at managing that objectively deal with that. And that's life.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll really release this right away, because I might just sit back and listen to it a few times. 2 points where I was like, call me. One was on the business side. I'm going to message you later, and I'm going to grab a few hours of your time. If I can't, I'll fly back over. And what we might do, a barter, I'll bring the acid, and we'll do a 1-for-1. I'll bring 10 hits. It'll be, fear and loathing in Sydney. We'll go to Tokyo. We'll grab some sushi. We'll chop it up. We'll get off our heads. It'll be great.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate your time as people now realize, if they hadn't already, just how valuable it is. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I just love the fact that you do the thing every day, and people who know what success looks like see that. Be like, this guy doesn't need to bang on and tell you, to DM people or cold call people. You just, that's the trappings of like a true successful business owner, is they don't have time to start telling you how to run your business because they're too busy figuring out how to manipulate human psychology on the internet all day. It's great. So, dude, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. This has been super, super useful.
Cheers, Jordan.